Keith Gave covered the Detroit Red Wings for a number of years and is known for by a lot of certainly the old school Red Wings fans like the three of us here for his work for the Free Press. But more recently, Keith has turned author, and we're going to talk about that as well. But we're so happy to have him, first time guest on Knee Jerks. Keith Gave is on the other end of our line. Keith, how you doing tonight?
I'm well, guys. I'm well. Thanks very much for having me. And before we get into hockey, though, I'd like to broach one subject that is fairly prominent right now. You know, we're on the eve of the 60th anniversary of one of the darkest days in our history. You know that, right?
Oh, when Bill Ford bought the Lions?
Who said that? Who said that?
It was me. It was Greg. You can't.
Greg, I suspected that you're the historian, that you might know the answer. The go-to answer, of course, is when Kennedy was assassinated, right? But that same day, about the same time Kennedy was shot, Bill Ford was closing the deal to buy the Detroit Lions for $4.5 million.
Yeah, he bought it from a whole bunch of people, actually.
144 shareholders, yes.
Yep. And you're right. It is a little known fact, and it's so appropriate, isn't it, Keith?
Yeah, well, it is. It is. It's a sad day for a lot of us, but you know, there's a lot of excitement about this football team now. They won about 40% of their games since the Ford owned the team, but you know, they're one game behind Philadelphia, is the one of the best record in the NFL right now. It's kind of shocking, isn't it?
I've got another JFK story factoid for you, Keith, that you may not know. The great Lenny Bruce. You remember Lenny Bruce?
Oh yes.
There used to be a comedian back in the Kennedy administration named Vaughn Meter, and Vaughn did a bunch of his gig was Kennedy impersonations. All he did was impersonate JFK, and he even recorded a couple of albums and so forth. That was his gig.
I remember that. I remember that guy. Yeah.
So Vaughn Meter that was his thing. Okay, so Kennedy gets shot. Now, Lenny Bruce goes on stage, and I can't remember what city this was in, but this is actually the night of the assassination. They did not cancel the show.
Whoa.
Lenny goes on stage, and the first thing he says is, "Vaughn Meter is fucked."
And then he was immediately arrested and ushered out.
Yeah. Leave it to Lenny. He did not mince any words, and he was right. Vaughn Meter was fucked, and his career.
Yeah, that's funny.
Tubes, if you can imagine. But anyway, we're so glad to have you here. We're so thrilled. Again, we had a couple of false starts, as I said on Twitter, but you're here with us now, and that's great. First thing I want to talk about, though, first of all, where are you at right now? Where are you calling? Where are we calling you at? Where are you at?
I am living in Houghton Lake.
Oh, okay.
About 3 hours north of Detroit. Yeah.
Okay.
We had a vacation home up here when I bought it when I was working at the Free Press, and just kind of was able to finally retire here and doing a little fishing and writing a couple of books and trying to relax and take it easy, but it's not so easy.
Well, you're staying in the state of Michigan, which is great. And so
you know what? We tried to move to Florida, but you know what? Florida blows.
Yeah,
it's a terrible place. You know, we tried.
Dad lives there.
5 years ago, we moved. We thought we were moving there for good. We lasted about 6 months. I had to get the hell out of Trumpistan.
Oh yeah.
It was just a terrible place. You know, the pandemic hit and people are walking around. Nobody wore a mask. You got laughed at if you wore a mask at the supermarket. And we got the hell out of there and moved back to northern Michigan, and here we are.
All right.
Keith, you know why there's so many hurricanes in Florida, right?
Go ahead, tell me. Something sucks.
Well, no. God's trying to get rid of it.
Oh yeah, there you go. Oh my God, yeah. It's
again, Al's dad. We got to be careful. Al's dad lives in Florida. He's a big Tampa Bay Rays fan, and lives and dies with the Rays.
A lot of good people do. Yes.
Oh yeah. And but he moved there before the state got real crazy. You know, he's been there like 16, 17 years now, and and he's a Democrat, and he just does not talk politics with anybody down there.
You can't.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's terrible.
So, first of all, how many years did you do the Red Wings gig at the Free?
I was at the Free Press for 15 years. The first year on the news desk as a city desk reporter, and then 14 years on the sports desk. And most of that time was covering the Red Wings. I wasn't a beat guy the entire time. We've had a couple of other beat writers. I graduated to writing columns, about the Red Wings while I was covering other things. I covered, a lot of big time fights out in Vegas. I covered, a one season of Michigan football, as a matter of fact, in 1997.
Okay. Oh wow, good year to do that.
Yeah. They played 12 games, won them all. My last assignment at the Free Press was the Rose Bowl game against Washington State in New Year's Day, 1998.
Nice. Your career with the Red Wings, though, kind of paralleled their ascent to one of the top teams in the NHL. Fortunately, I mean, right? Is that not correct?
Well, it took me a while, but yeah. When my first year, guys, that was the very worst season in their long history. They played They played 80 games. They won. Yeah. They had 40 points. They went 17, 57, and 6.
I remember that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fired 2 coaches, Harry Neal by Christmas time, and then Brad Park at the end of the year. Right. Then they hired a funny little French guy, Jacques Demers, and things started, going the other way. But they got really lucky making it to the Stanley Cup semifinals two consecutive years after they were the worst team in the league.
Sure.
And only because they played in the worst division in hockey, the North Division. You win a couple of rounds against mediocre teams, and all of a sudden you're playing Edmonton in the Stanley Cup semifinals, and that's what they did for a couple of years. They lost a 5-game series both years, but I tell you what, the bandwagon got really revved up really fast. Those series in the late 1980s, especially the Toronto series with Jacques Demers and John Brophy on the other bench with a black hat doing the choke sign to the Wings. I mean, I'm telling you guys, that was as fun as covering the Stanley Cups in 97, 98.
Well, you had some characters on that team. You had Probert and Kosher and Klima and a young Yzerman as a captain, and you had some some gritty guys like Dave Barr and Sean Burr, and you had it's kind of a cast of characters, no?
Yeah, and you had Greg Steffen, who was a good golfer, not a very good goaltender, but a really good guy. And Glennie Hanlon came along and won some huge playoff games, and was kind of maybe the most favorite guy in the dressing room. You're right. Harold Sneps, remember him? Mm-hmm. It was a team full of characters, and most of them got busted at a bar called Goose Loonies in Edmonton one night.
That was certainly a famous incident. And I don't about that, by the way, some folks kind of indicted Jacques on that one. What say you about that? I mean, did Jacques lose control of the team? What was the deal with that?
Well, that was the beginning of the end for Jacques Demers, for sure. I'll tell you exactly how it happened. I get a lot of credit for breaking that story, or I get a lot of blame because people are still pissed off at those of us at the Free Press for writing that story. I couldn't believe the anger and the vitriol I got when I returned home from Edmonton from at least a good half of the fan base. It was crazy. But we were in Edmonton, and I was staying at what I thought was a team hotel, the Westin Hotel, where the team always stayed in Edmonton. And Mike and Marion Illich got ticked off at the hotel there, the Westin in Edmonton, because they had a great big sign in the over the front area there. It said, "Go Oilers! Let's go Oilers! Win the Stanley Cup!" Right? The Illiches didn't care for that because they were spending thousands of dollars to have their team staying there. They found another hotel. I didn't realize that, so the team was at a different hotel. Mitch Albom called me. On the way out, I said, where are you staying? And I said, I'm at the Westin, but the team's not here. And he said, where's the team staying? And I told him, and he found that hotel, and he went to stay there at the team hotel, wherever they were staying, right? Mm-hmm. He's at breakfast the next morning. At breakfast, not hiding behind, he was kind of reading his newspaper, and off in the corner of the booth. And a lot of the Red Wings players were in there having breakfast, and Brent Ashton came down into the dressing room rather loudly, looked at his team and says, where the fuck is Petr Klima? I'm going to kick his ass. He took Proby out drinking last night. And of course, we said it loud enough for Mitch to hear it. Mitch called me right away. We didn't even go to the morning skate, Mitch and I. We went out. We killed some time, waited for the team to have their morning skate. Came back at around lunchtime, and Mitch and I went into the dining area at the team hotel there, and there was Jacques with his entire coaching staff, the scouts, probably about 10, 12 guys having lunch. And Mitch and I there says, "Hey, Jacques, you got a second? Can we talk to you?" And I don't know if I would have got the time of day if I had asked him about myself, but because Mitch was there with me, Jacques got up right away and came. We went to a corner of the dining area, and said, "So I started." I said, "So Jacques, we heard that some of the boys went out last night and broke curfew, and Neil Smith and Colin Campbell found them at a bar called Goose Loonies." And Jacques just turned completely white like a ghost. He took a deep breath and he spilled his guts. You know what? And gave us. He gave Mitch enough for a column and me enough for a story that was stripped across the top of the front page of the newspaper. If that would have happened today, in most, what would the coach say? It's an internal matter. We know about it. We're handling it. That's it. With no further comment. Right? That's it.
Right.
And if Jacques would have said that, I don't think he'd still be coaching, but he would have coached a lot longer than he did. But he spilled his guts. Bob Probert said it very well in his book. The players lost complete respect. He threw them all under the bus, and that was the beginning of the end. They lost that 8-3, I think, that the next night or that night, and then the next year they made the playoffs, got knocked out in the first round. The following year they didn't make the playoffs, and Demers was out of a job. The players quit on him.
We should really kind of set the stage here and give some more context around this for folks who may not know. That Goose Loonies incident of which you speak, I believe, Keith, was the night before Game 5 in a series in which the Red Wings were trailing 3-1, I believe.
Correct. That's right. So
the very night before the game. Now you're enough old school to know that maybe a generation prior to you, that story would never have seen the light of day, correct?
Probably not. Not.
Because the writers traveled with they traveled the team now too.
And they ran with them, yeah. And we didn't do that. No, we didn't do that.
So I'm just thinking back to. I know I'm really going back now. I'm going back to the 40s and 50s where the reporters really kind of looked the other way when that kind of stuff went on, especially when
they did. I mean, Joe Falls, one of the greatest baseball writers in Detroit history, in American history, really. I mean, he used to sit in the back of the bus with those guys, and he ran with them. He didn't tell too many tales out of school. It's just the way it was. My generation, by the time we came along, there was pretty strict lines that we adhered to. We tried to practice good journalism, and we tried to develop some mutual respect. There were lines that we didn't cross. If I walked into a bar, a nightclub, or whatever, and I saw a bunch of players there, I just kind of wave and leave. I wouldn't hang around. Yeah. And if they saw me with a group of other writers and so on, they'd turn around and go and find another place. And that's just how it was. You didn't do that.
Right, exactly. We're talking with Keith Gave, former Red Wings beat writer for the Free Press and current author, and on the Knee Jerks, I'm Greg Eno, of course, along with Al Beaton and Nick Milanovich. And let's bring Big Al in. What you got for Keith Gave?
Yeah, this is kind of a good way to maybe segue into some of your books, specifically starting with The Russian Five, with a story of espionage, defection, bribery, and courage. Because a lot of that did begin the espionage part went back as far as getting Petr Klima out of Eastern Europe. So, how far ahead of the rest of the NHL were the Red Wings back then when it came to scouting and contacts and moving players around to get them out of the situations they were in?
Well, they were among the leaders in the NHL at the time. There were there's some teams that wouldn't touch a Russian player with a 10-foot stick, I guess, like the Philadelphia Flyers, for instance. But there were other teams like I think Montreal was kind of ahead of the curve too when they orchestrated Peter Svoboda's defection. Not only did they orchestrate his defection, but they introduced him at the draft. They drafted him and introduced him. You know, it's a pretty cool story. You know, but you know, you go back to the Petr Klima. The Detroit goes all. That story goes to 1983, the year that the first draft that with Devellano and Mike Ilitch together. Right, the first player they drafted was Steve Yzerman. Then they drafted Lane Lambert. And they drafted Bob Probert. Pretty good draft so far, guys, right? Lambert would have had a great career if he hadn't had an eye injury. Then they also drafted Joe Kocur and Petr Klima in the 5th round. But they drafted Petr Klima, you know, who was behind the Iron Curtain, Czechoslovakia, great young player, he was known for being kind of a bad boy over there, loosey-goosey. They figured if anybody might be a candidate for defection, it might be him. And, you know, Devellano turned to Mike Ilitch and said, Mike, we got the pretty good player over there. We don't know if we can get him or not, but, you know, what do you think? And Mike says, if he's a player, take him. We'll worry about it later. They drafted him, and it took him a couple of years. But in the summer of 1985, they were able to orchestrate a pretty daring defection in West Germany, bringing Petr Klima over to play for the Detroit Red Wings. And you know, they're mind-blowing skills that guy had, but a little bit too much of a party guy.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, how much does Mike Ilitch play in this stuff, you know, in being able to get these players? It sounds like, you know, if he wasn't willing to foot the bill and let the Wings get involved with a little skullduggery, none of this Russian 5 stuff happens.
No, it would not have. And, you know, like when they were having serious discussions about drafting these guys, Mike Ilitch was all in. He said, look, I got a little bit of money, and I have some really good contacts in Washington. If you draft these guys, I'll do everything I can to get them out. We'll make it happen. It started with Mike Ilitch, period. And you know, he basically handed the ball off to his son-in-law, Jim Lights, who was married to Denise at the time, his eldest daughter. And you know, one crazy July afternoon in 1989, after they had drafted Sergei Fedorov and Vladimir Konstantinov in that remarkable draft in 1989, Lights and I had lunch, and he asked me to do a very strange, amazing favor for them. Talk about crossing lines a minute ago. I crossed the big one there.
What was that?
Well, I kind of did something that any editor or strictly ethical journalist would never do, and that's do a favor for a team. They asked me to go pass a message along to go to Helsinki, Finland, and use my press credentials, NHL credentials, to get into a game where the Soviet national team was having essentially a training camp in Finland. They were playing a game against one of the Finnish elite teams, and asked me to go over there and try and get an interview with Vladdy and Sergei after the game. And while I'm interviewing them, pass along a message that they wanted the Wings wanted them to defect, come play Detroit for the Detroit Red Wings. And I did.
Was 89 also, Keith, the year that they drafted Lidstrom?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's this draft. They drafted Mike Sillinger in the first round, suitcase Mike Sillinger, who played over 1,000 games in the NHL, very good player.
Which is amazing to me. That's absolutely fascinating to me that Sillinger played 1,000 games. I don't know why. It just is.
Well, he was a good journeyman, a really good all utility infielder kind of guy. Right. And in the second round, they drafted a defenseman named Bob Bugner from Windsor, who played almost 800 games. He's an assistant coach now. Then in the third round, they took Nick Lidstrom. Yeah. In the fourth, they took Lidstrom first. In the fourth round, they took Sergei Fedorov. You got back-to-back Hall of Famers in the third and fourth rounds of a draft. How about that, guys?
Right. That's the thing. You know, we've talked, Keith, we've talked a lot, Al and I, and especially in years past, about how the Red Wings were able to find these Hall of Famers, really, who were not first round draft picks. And that's, to me, I've always been fascinated by that. In every sport, whether it's football or hockey or wherever, where you can find these just generational players in the lower rounds. We're talking with Keith Gave, former Red Wings beat writer and current author, and the Knee Jerks here. I'm Greg. Along with Big Al Beaton, who you just heard, and let's bring Nick Milanovich in. What you got for Keith Gave?
Hey, Keith. I actually, before our recording today, I read the Russian Five. I had seen the movie a while back, but I love the book.
Thank you.
For me, what I would say is, if you're a Red Wings fan and you haven't read it, shame on you, because especially if you remember those days, because I remember that's kind of where I grew up as a hockey fan, during those Red Wings teams, and remembering all those near misses with the Stanley Cup and the playoffs, and so I could just relive all of that in the book. It just you remember all of that.
Thank you.
So fantastic. By the way, I think I might have been in Helsinki at the same time you were in '89.
Whoa! Wow! Wow!
Wow, that is amazing.
Very close, because I had just finished high school in my case, and I went on a exchange program to the Soviet Union.
Wow!
And the last leg of the journey was to go from Moscow, and we would go to Helsinki. And I can't remember exactly when it was. It was either in July or in August. So it's roughly the time you were there.
Right. Yeah, I was there about August 10th, 11th, right in there.
Yeah, I might have been there just before that, but I can't remember. Yeah. I don't know where the hell I'll even find the information when I was there, but so it's kind of cool.
Were you a Russian language or area studies student?
No, I got into this program called People to People International. It's a program. I was going for some more technical scientific stuff.
Sure.
My family's Serbian, so I could pick up a little Russian.
Sure.
And, but no way can I speak it. So it was just kind of interesting that, that time coincided with
what a coincidence. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering, because I read also other books about Russian hockey players during that time, and what kind of training schedule that was. It was insanity, 11 months of 12 that you're away from your family and stuff like that.
Right.
That breeds a certain type of hockey player. And
very, very angry, bitter hockey player.
I would think so.
Yeah.
How does that compare to say hockey players coming out of Russia or nowadays? It cannot be the same.
Well, no, it's not the same. It's not the same at all. I mean, they don't go essentially to hockey prison for 11 months and get, if they're lucky, get a month off out of the year. They still, their training techniques, their work on fundamentals in Russia, like Sweden, like Finland and the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and so on. The Europeans just spend so much more time working on fundamentals, and the Russians, they have some unique, different kinds of skating drills that date back all the way to the father of Soviet hockey, Tarasov, Alexander Tarasov, and you talk to Slava Fetisov about Tarasov, and watch Fetisov's eyes light up at the kind of players that Tarasov produced. The most dominant hockey program in the world for a couple of decades in the Soviet Union.
And it was very different style. I mean, I remember from your book, you were talking about how when the Russian Five was on the Red Wings, it was a very possession-oriented style versus the dump and chase, which I always thought was kind of ridiculous.
It was stupid. It's stupid. I mean, even Gordie Howe used to say, and Gordie Howe said it, and Igor Larionov echoed it. Why do I want to dump the puck in and have, I have the puck. Why do I have to dump the puck in and go chase it again to get it back again? That's stupid hockey. And nobody played the possession game better than Igor Larionov. And to watch that guy play, it was a ballet on ice, and with them, people remember those five guys on the ice playing together. The Russians, they could control the play, have the puck for 45, 50 seconds, and end up passing it into the net. Mm-hmm. That's simple. And the players on the ice, you listen to Brendan Shanahan tell stories, and others, they would sit on and just kind of laugh. at the way their teammates were playing. And it kind of got a little contagious to the other guys, hey, you know what? They had this feeling it's our puck. Let's not let the other team have it. And they got pretty good at it, except for like the grind line guys. They had to, they played their game. Scotty said, no, don't you guys try that. You just go do your thing. But Detroit became very much, not just those 5 guys, but as a team, a very possession-oriented, puck control team. And it's kind of hard to score, guys, when you don't have the puck.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Detroit had it all night long.
That's true. We're talking with Keith Gave, former Red Wings beat writer and current author here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno, along with Al Beaton and Nick Milanovich. Keith, Scotty Bowman, when they brought it in 1993, who he fascinates me because I always, I'm in the camp of, and I firmly believe this, that Scotty Bowman is the greatest coach who ever lived, period. And the reason I say that is because of all sports, because I feel like he won with so many different ways. He won in different generations, different eras, number one. He won with different players. He won with different styles. And he just won wherever he went, except in Buffalo, although he had good teams in Buffalo, but never went to the Stanley Cup. But to me, and I don't know if you agree with this assessment, but to me, it makes sense that it was Scotty that would be the one to put those Russian 5 on the ice and who would recognize the power of that. What say you about that?
Well, first of all, I agree with you 1,000% about Scotty being the greatest coach in the history of sports, period. An unbelievable mind that he has for, just mostly just putting the right players on the ice at the right time. He had a knack for that other even really smart coaches never could quite figure out. But you're right. Scotty won in all with all kinds of different teams and so on. And he's also earlier in his career had his ass beaten enough by Russian teams to see what they were capable of and how they did it. Right. And he came to Detroit, and they had 3 Russians, right? They had the 3 young guys, Lidstrom, Fedorov, Konstantinov, and Kozlov, 3 good young players. And then then they started. He came in 93. They got beat he got upset by San Jose in the first round. One of the worst upsets in Wings playoff history. Yeah, sure. And then the next year, the next fall, they started with a player lockout. Right? They didn't play until January, and the older Russians, Fetisov and Larionov, they were in different teams. Fetisov in New Jersey, Larionov was in San Jose at the time. They decided to gather up a lot of the former Soviet NHL stars that were playing in North America. Let's all go back and play a series of games while this lockout is going on, and kind of have a little bit of a homecoming and take our players back to back home to play some games. And they did that. And I went over there. I spent 3 weeks over there while they took the teams over. They took those guys over, and they also took Sergei Fedorov and Alexander McGillney with them, 2 young guys who had defected. Right. They defected, right? And I talked to Sergei at the time. He was a little nervous. He was really nervous because he didn't know what kind of homecoming he was going to get. Were they going to arrest him? Were they going to shoot him?
Right. Yeah.
But Fetisov, very politically connected, had greased the skids enough so that these 2 kids got a hero's welcome and got their Russian passports in their names again, and they were welcomed as citizens of, as Sergei Fedorov said, I returned to a new country. It was a different country. Mm-hmm. I went home to the Russian Federation. Soviet Union's long gone, right? So it was a very interesting time for him, for the entire NHL. But anyways, they played these 5 games, and I came back to from that trip, and I saw Scotty in early January when the teams were starting to practice again. The lockout's over; they're going to start some play. They played a 48-game schedule, I think, that year. Yeah. And I said, Scotty, you might take a look at Slava Fetisov. You're always looking for defensive help. Slava looked like he could still play. Excuse me a minute. I'm sorry, I got a little bit of a cough. I said, he's sitting in a press box in New Jersey, and I think he can play. I'm sorry, guys. I got a tickle in my throat here. Just a second.
It's all right.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I'm so sorry. Anyways, I said, Scotty, don't ask me. Don't take my word for it. Talk to Sergey. Sergey played with him for 5 games. See what Sergey says. I think 2 weeks later, max, Scotty had made the trade with New Jersey to bring Fetisov to Detroit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the next fall, excuse me, he traded for Igor Larionov and had all 5. And the magic really started to happen then, guys.
Everybody kind of, the stories of Scotty, maybe being a little aloof with his players and playing head games. That's everybody kind of knows that by now. I mean, that's not really any news. But
right.
as a reporter with the team, Keith, on a daily basis, how was Scotty how was he with the reporters?
No, just horrible. Okay. Terrible. As bad as it was for the players, it was for the media. I mean, he didn't. Scotty Bowman was an intelligence gatherer. He didn't share much intelligence. He didn't give much away, but he was always picking the brains of visiting reporters. He loved visiting reporters. I'd go in with a guy from Toronto. Yeah, hey, how's Matt Sundin playing there in Chicago? I heard he's got kind of a bad leg or something. And all of a sudden the reporter from Toronto spilling his guts because Scotty's trying to pick his brain, right? And you don't realize it till later, but the guy walks out with an empty notebook and Scotty's got all the information. But beyond that, I mean, he can just make your life miserable. And I'm saying all that, and Scotty and I had our moments. It got ugly a couple of times. We were face to face exchanging spit about 3 inches apart. And there are witnesses. And there were a couple of times I thought he was going to hit me. I really did. Yeah.
Wow.
It got bad, but in the end today, Scotty and I we get along just fine. He sent me a really nice note the other day when I sent him a happy 90th birthday wishes email. We speak on the phone from time to time and so on. I love Scotty Bowman. You know why, guys? He gave me a championship team to cover in Detroit for one thing. Mm-hmm. And number 2, he made me a better reporter. He made me work harder. He made me work really, really hard. Okay. There were times where I get so pissed off at him that I would walk by his office. I wouldn't even try and talk to him. After practice, I just walk right on by, go in, talk to the players, talk to the assistant coaches, talk to everybody else. And, I go a week or 10 days without talking to him. And pretty soon he'd be flagging me down. Hey, Keith, come, I got something for you. And one time after one of these spats that we had, he pulled out a Scotty Bowman Topps hockey card. And he wrote, "To Keith, Scotty Bowman," and he handed it to me. He said, "Oh, by the way, Chris Osgood's playing in goal tonight," which is the kind of information that he never gave us, So he could be. You never knew what you're going to get from day to day with Scotty Bowman, but I love the guy. I love him.
We're talking with Keith Gave, former Red Wings beat reporter and current author here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno, along with Big Al Beaton and Nick Milanovich. Let's bring Big Al back in. What you got for Keith Gave?
Yeah, it's funny that as we're talking about the Russian 5 in that era of the Red Wings, is that sometimes I think people forget there was an honorary Russian in Doug Brown who played with those guys a lot. Now, how did Doug Brown, of all people, end up becoming so simpatico with the Russian 5?
I don't know how it happened, but it did. I mean, this is one of those things that work. I mean, that's the wisdom, the magic of Scotty Bowman. He didn't play the Russian 5 together all the time. He didn't play them together enough, as far as I'm concerned. He mixed them up a lot. He played Igor Larionov between Darren McCarty and Brendan Shanahan, or Shanahan and LaPointe. He'd play Yzerman and Fedorov together, killing penalties or whatever. He just mixed teams up, or mixed players up. And when he was putting, when he was using Larionov in another line, he put Sergey at center and Kozlov on one wing and Brown on the other. And as a matter of fact, I think Doug Brownov scored 2 goals in the fourth and final game of that 1998 sweep of the Washington Capitals for their second Stanley Cup. in '98 there. Doug just complimented them nicely. He could skate with them, for one thing.
What yeah, well, that in and of itself is will definitely ingratiate you with them.
Correct.
Let's bring Nick Milanovich back into the discussion. Let's see what Nick's got for Keith Gave.
Well, I was wondering, since we're kind of like talking about your books and some of the Russian Five, like how's Vladdy doing? Do you keep in?
You know, Vladdy, I saw him. I was probably about 4 or 5 months ago now. I saw him 2 or 3 times there in a very, very short span. They were having some fundraisers for him because of the the crazy insurance shenanigans going on here in Michigan. He lost a lot of his 24/7 health coverage, or was in danger of losing it, like 20,000 other people, because he got screwed by the insurance industry. I was the second book I wrote. I put Vladdy's picture on the cover, and I called it Vlad the Impaler. And I was full of what I thought was really, really good stuff that I wasn't able to fit into the Russian Five. And I'm donating most of the proceeds from that book to his special needs trust that was established when the insurance industry did its thing. So, but I saw Vladdy. He's doing pretty damn good. I tell you what, he's doing a lot better than any of us would have done if we had we been in that limo and suffered the same kind of injuries that he had. They gave him a 10% chance to live. He lived. He's doing pretty darn well. Every time I see him, every time his face lights up. He said, "Hey, Keith," and he sticks out his hand and he gives me a handshake, and he squeezes it just as hard and firm as the night they won the Stanley Cup on June 7th, 1997. Wow. He can get around on a walker. Okay. Here's the thing. He remembers who he is, what he did, who he was.
Yep.
He remembers all that, but he can't remember 5 minutes ago.
Right.
He's got no short-term memory.
Right.
And he can do his autograph now is like a crayon, a V, and he can do a K. That's his autograph now, and I have it on one of the Russian one of the books that he signed for me. But all things considered, guys, he's been doing pretty darn well, and he's getting great care.
There was a great Keith. There was a great trailer for that. I'm not sure which documentary it was about the Red Wings Avalanche rivalry, and it gave me chills. This trailer, just the trailer, gave me chills. And the end of the trailer was Vladdy on camera, and there's a voice off camera that says, "What do you remember about that rivalry?" And he says, "Beat them, beat them."
Yeah, that was,
I love that.
That was the ESPN the ESPN special. What do they call it? Rivalry? Is that what it was called? Something like Unrivaled. Unrivaled. Yeah.
As we wrap things up here, I'm going to ask you, and this might be a little uncomfortable for you to do, and I apologize if it is, but since you've been out of the beat writer game, if you will, can you tell us a little bit about what your reflections are, Keith, about the way the team is covered now? I mean, Al and I have been critics. I'll be quite frank with you. Al and I have been critics of the Detroit media in all sports, not just the Red Wings, with the way that it's been covered. The teams have been covered, and i.e., we think that it's too soft, it's too rah. What say you about the way that the Red Wings and other sports teams in Detroit are covered nowadays?
Yeah. Listen, I got to be real careful here. Because you're talking about my friends, my colleagues at the Free Press and so on. I mean, Helene St. James was a kid, just coming aboard when I was there, and she's taking care of the team now. And Ted Colfin at the News was a friend of mine. So on. Listen, and frankly, I'd almost sound like a cliche when I said, well, it's not as good as we used to do it, right? With the way in the old days we did it, I don't want to be that guy either.
Right.
I will say that things have changed enormously in covering sports, big time sports, whether it's college or the professional sports. Yeah. The teams have learned how to control the message better than I thought they ever would. The media just doesn't have the access to the players that I had in my time.
Yeah.
I could go to Sean Burr and say, hey, Sean, I got to do this feature story, on you or your line or whatever. Can we go to lunch tomorrow? Yeah, sure, no problem. If you take me to lunch or breakfast on the road, Steve Yzerman, breakfast on the road, whatever. You could do all these things. You could walk into the dressing room as they're taking off their gear after the game and talk to 4 or 5 of them before they hit the showers. You can't do any of that anymore. You just don't have the same relationships with the players, and you always got a PR flack or two, a running interference. I want to talk to so and so, the guy who may have screwed up and allowed the bad goal. He can't come. He's not available tonight. Sorry, you can't talk to him. It's really hard to do the job that you want to do when you don't have access to the people you need to tell the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and also, guys, the staffs have shrunk to an embarrassing level in terms of trying to cover all the bases with the amount of people you have in the staff. These people are overwhelmed. The last time I covered fairly intensely the Red Wings, I was doing it for Fox Sports Detroit for their website. And, I would go, after the games, I would see Helene and Ted. They're asking a couple of questions, and Babcock is still talking, right, guys? And Helene and the beat writers are tweeting out this important thing that he just said. They're trying to be first with it. They're trying to take video. They're trying to take pictures. They're trying to do all this stuff for social media and the website, and the story that they wind up writing is going to fit in the newspaper at some point, right? Is the last thing on their list of things to do. I would hate that job right now. I would never want my old job back. Never. Yeah. I feel sorry for those people. Is the coverage the same? I get it. It's lukewarm at best. There's no contentiousness. Nobody. I enjoyed covering my team and the Red Wings, especially. I was a critical beat guy. My bosses liked me to be critical, to take them to task. Fans loved that. Readers loved that. They expected
and you were. By the way, I'm gonna pause you right here and remind everybody who's listening to this and watching this podcast that you absolutely were contentious at times when it was necessary. You weren't contentious just to be contentious. You were. As you know, mad respect for you because you did things that needed to be done when they needed to be done. And I just want everybody to know that.
Well, and thank you very much for saying that. But, as I told the players, they didn't much like the criticism either. But when I was critical of the team, the coach, a player, whatever, I did my homework. I talked to other players. I talked to coaches. I talked to scouts in the press box. I did my homework. So that the opinion that I was hoping to express was validated by people who really knew hockey, knew what they were talking about. I did my homework before I was critical on anybody, and I took a lot of pride in the way I covered the team. Can I get back to one thing, guys, real quick? I know we're getting close to the end. We were talking about that 89 draft, and they drafted Lidstrom and Fedorov in rounds 3 and rounds 4. In the 5th round, they wanted to take another Russian.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to take another guy. The league said, no, he's not eligible. And the Wing scout said, damn it, I know he's eligible. I know he is. And the Wings said, well, let's revisit. We'll take him in the 6th round. Right. Mm-hmm. So they drafted some other guy in the 5th round who never played one NHL game, I think. And in the 6th round, 2 or 3 picks before Detroit's turn came, the Vancouver Canucks took Pavel Bure.
Oh.
That's the guy the Wings wanted to draft in the 5th round. In the 5th round. 3, 4, and 5 Hall of Famers with 3 picks in a row.
Real quick, Keith. I interviewed Brendan Shanahan back in 2010, and he told me that when he wanted to, he wanted out of Hartford, of course, and he said that he told me that the league wanted Shanahan, to go to Washington, and he fought that, and he said, no, I want to go to Detroit. And of course they engineered the trade to the Red Wings, and Shanahan, in my mind, was the last, well, not even the last, but one of the last of the great power forwards in the NHL. Does such a position, Keith, exist in today's NHL?
Boy, those guys are hard to find. Really, really hard to find. You know, a guy like maybe Matthew Tkachuk, a little bit of a, you know, he's a power forward, net front guy, irritable. You hate to play against the guy, you know, and his brother Brady might be one of those guys too, but they're few and far between. Everybody now is a speedster, you know, skating 100 miles an hour, crashing into the boards, you know, it's a speed game now. To me, it's not nearly as interesting as it was when I was covering hockey, but it's a different kind of game, sometimes entertaining, but it's sometimes very, very frustrating too.
Real quick, before we let you go, I want to get your take on the whole Steve Yzerman thing. I know this is a loaded question. I know we could probably do another segment just on this, but your thoughts on Stevie's efforts so far with the Red Wings.
I think he's doing a really good job. I know people are starting to get a little weary, and that's understandable. I think they've made progress every single year. They continue to make progress. I think they're right now. These Red Wings are exactly where I thought they would be. You know, they say that it's American Thanksgiving. You should know a lot about about your team. It's a little early. Usually they play about 20 games by this time. The Wings have played 17, and right now they're on the cusp. They're not in the playoff picture right now. They're just out of it, which is kind of where I expected them to be all you know, come springtime. In the hunt, I'm not sure the goaltending is good enough to get them there, but you know, we'll see what happens. I don't think it is. I don't think it is by a long shot, but I'm trying to be nice here. I think that Yzerman has done a lot of things. He hasn't found a goaltender. He's had a revolving door of goaltenders, but he hasn't been able to find one to stick. He still doesn't have one, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
And I don't know if Kosa is that guy. He's not in Grand Rapids right now. He's slow to ascend. You remember there were two great goaltenders in that draft, Wallstead and Kosa. Yzerman traded up to get Kosa, and I'm thinking, whoa, you know, listen, I like Steve Yzerman has drafted some great players, including Vasilevsky in Tampa. He knows what he's doing. Let's see what this Kosa guy does. And right now, the jury's still out on him, so it still could be a while before they have a playoff goaltender.
That's not good news to hear.
It's not. It's not. I mean, that's the way it is. Otherwise, I like the young defenseman he's drafted, the young forwards. I mean, you know, he's drafted some really good players, and they're going to be fine. But they need a goaltender to get to have any kind of a playoff run.
You know, I keep lying to you. I keep telling you that's the last question, but I do have one more, and that is, you know, Nick and I and Al have talked a lot about Stevie, and we've talked a lot about the cash that he has in Detroit.
Yeah.
My opinion is that he'll never be fired. Will never be fired from the Red Wings. That's my opinion. What about that? I mean, you know, Al has been probably one of the three of us has been the most critical of Stevie in terms of, and only in the sense that he says, look, and Al's right, by the way, to say, look, you know, this Yzerman love has got to, you know, this has got to be abated a little bit. I mean, we got to be a little bit careful about, you know, just because he's Steve Yzerman and he's a legend and blah blah blah, kind of, you know, the whole Joe Dumars thing with the Pistons. You know, is he? You know, my opinion is he'll never be fired. I mean, that's just my opinion. But, and the second part of that is, at what point, you know, I know I've written a column, and you probably have read it. I've written a column that says that Stevie is, to me, I think, wants to win a Stanley Cup as an executive with the Red Wings every bit as much, if not more, than he does as he did with the Red Wings as a player. So,
if not more, I agree.
What about this Yzerman thing? This is a conundrum, I think. Al was right, by the way. I mean, there's a lot of folks that just give this guy a free pass. At what point does the free pass expire?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I don't know. I know that he is absolutely revered by the Ilitch family, and you know, as long as Marian Ilitch is drawing a breath, he's not going anywhere. Right. Like Sergei Fedorov's number is never going to be in the Rafters at Little Caesars.
Don't get us going on that. Yeah.
I really don't want to start that either. But and I think that, you know, he's kind of a big brother, favorite uncle of the kids in the family. Including Chris Ilitch, who's running the whole franchise now. Steve Yzerman is going to have a very, very, very long leash, and the trouble's going to have to start from the fan base to get any sort of rumbling going. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. He's that well thought of.
But Keith, it has to at some point. I mean, they ran Joe Dumars out of Detroit. Joe Dumars was about as beloved as anyone.
Yeah, but Joe drafted Darko.
Yeah. Well, that right. That's true. And that followed
a big screw up. Yeah.
And that still follows, frankly.
But Joe, because they got a new owner. It wasn't with Davidson family. It's when the new owner came in and has given us the Pistons we know and love right now. His judgment hasn't been that good either. So that's when Dumars was forced out. There's no change in ownership with the Wings.
I don't think we're going to see a change in ownership of the hockey team anytime soon. But if that were to happen, then all bets are off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If somebody else bought the team, then Steve Yzerman's got it would be a lot shorter lease for sure.
Keith, Gabe, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. We could talk to you for another hour. Frankly, this has been just unbelievably fun, and we really enjoyed it. And I hope you have too.
Fun for me too, guys. Anytime, right?
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have it back. We'll have it back for sure. Okay.
Sounds good. You bet.
Okay, my friend. Take care.
Take care. Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye. Wow, good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
That was one of the best interviews we've ever done. Frankly, that was unbelievable.
Like I said, we could have just done the whole 2 hours just talking to Keith.
Oh,
we really
God
could have.
Almighty, absolutely.
Especially since I know the three of us all lived through that entire era, so we all know it intimately. So,
yeah,
like that's the first time we were talking about the Russian flag. Oh yeah, I forgot about Brownov. That kind of thing.
That was a great one. Yeah, I forgot about him. I forgot about that Brownov thing.
But no, that was awesome. That was a gret get. Thank God we finally got to talk to him after 2 months. So.
And Nick I thought Nick's question about Vladdy was wonderful. It was well timed, and
that could turn into a very messy situation.
That was great.
Instead of his needs.
That was a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I guess are we ready for Siddy?
Siddy just confirmed with me he's ready, so we can.
All right. I will add him. I'm still recording, so we'll just I'll get him on here and we'll get right to him. So.
Okay.
Are you there, Siddy?
I am here. Hello.
Awesome.
There you are. Look
hello, Al, Nick, Regino. Hello.
Are you in Brazil now? Or are you back home?
I am back home. Yeah, it was post midnight in Europe when your show is recorded, so that's why that was a no-go.
Okay, yeah, I understand. That's great. Well, good to have you here. And Al, let me know when you can get started.
We are recording, so give it like 5 seconds and fire away.
All right.
Okay. Siddy Hall is a good friend of the Knee Jerks, covers the Pistons for us, are the stats guru in the NBA here in the Knee Jerks, and we're happy to have him back. Not unfortunately, under sad circumstances, the Pistons 2-20 now or 2-50? I don't know what they are. But Siddy's here, and he's going to talk about that. And Siddy, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. And Greg, it's worth mentioning briefly. Back on November 4th, you talked about this future show about me appearing on this date. And I wrote at that time, I sure hope the Pistons are not in the middle of a 12-game losing streak.
Oh.
Not that I predicted it, but I did look at the schedule. They had a 3-game losing streak. I looked at the schedule, tough schedule, lots of injuries. It seemed like it might happen, and it did.
It has, and it's continuing. It seems to be unabated. And the Pistons, as we record this, are 2-13. They've lost 12 in a row, as City has indicated, and it doesn't look like it's going to abate anytime soon. City, you and I have chatted a little bit on Twitter. Nick Milanovich made a funny comment. He said, he said City he said City must be beside himself. And so actually, City was kind of chill about this. He feels that the Pistons are going to win a few games, but I don't see it. I mean, this is a team, City, that is really being torched, not only in Detroit, but I'm seeing national writers now just really shitting on this team, pardon the expression, and give us something to hang our hat on. What's going on with this, guys?
Well, first, I want to join the piñata party. I mean, this is there isn't much good to say right now. What a disappointing start. That's what makes it more painful. I mean, I think back to the bubble season, which was when they started getting rid of guys. Drummond was passed off, Reggie Jackson, those guys, and that team was oddly entertaining. We had no expectations. They battled hard. It was the Christian Wood, Bruce Brown team with Derrick Rose off the bench, and they were fun to watch. This team is just frustrating. We entered the year hoping that we would be watching games that mattered, and to be kicked in the groin this quickly is not a good feeling.
And I think you touched on something that I think Pistons fans are feeling is how quickly this has gone downhill. I mean, they won 2 out of the first 3 games, and then the 12-game losing streak. And I think to be 2-13 before Thanksgiving, I think is what's driving the angst, the frustration, the anxiety with this team.
Pitchforks
so bad so soon. What's that?
Yeah, the pitchforks are out. People want Weaver. Even Monty Williams is just getting roasted.
Yeah.
I mean, think about this. I was just for a comparison. Weird comparison, but remember back in 1974, Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, when they fought in what was then Zaire, it's now the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Was that the Rumble in the Jungle?
Rumble in the Jungle.
Yeah.
And what happened, I remember watching a documentary about that, and George Foreman didn't understand his audience. And George Foreman came off the plane before the fight with a German Shepherd in tow. And the people of, at that time, Zaire, they were just repulsed. George had no idea that was a police dog, and the citizens had a very bad relationship historically with the police and German Shepherds. And Detroit, Killian Hayes. We've had this 3-year torture session of watching Killian Hayes. The new guy comes into town, Monty Williams. He did the unthinkable. He put him in the starting lineup. Yeah. And we're watching this guy now for 35 minutes a night again for the 4th year. And Jaden Ivey coming off a solid rookie year.
Right.
Sometimes playing in the teens.
Right.
That is.
And not starting until recently. Yeah, right.
Torture. Absolute torture. What was that?
There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack here, City, and I don't know. There's so much to unpack, and you touched on one of them right now, the Hayes thing and Ivy and Pistons Twitter, which I don't know how much you pay attention to that, but I know you're on Reddit a lot, but Pistons Twitter is absolutely beside itself with this whole Hayes Ivy thing, and I know you don't know necessarily, but the whole let's because like Hayes has been talked to death. Ivy, though, that kind of surprised me. He seems to be in a doghouse, and somebody said on Twitter, and I don't know if it's true or not, that Monty has a tendency to have a doghouse, and he tends to have a tendency to be kind of above it all, and I don't know if that's seeping through with this Ivy thing. I mean, he finally did start him the other night, but
I'm learning these things like you are. I mean, right now I'm seeing a guy who's making $12 million a year who stands on the sidelines with his arms folded, you know,
Yeah.
and they're getting shellacked. And I'm like, Monty, react.
Yeah.
You know, he's got that Lenny Wilkins vibe, you know.
But Lenny won. Lenny
won a lot of games, right? You know. And Monty, just blow a gasket once. Just show us fans, we're just losing our minds, and we want you to get mad too.
Right. Yeah.
And that even adds to it. I mean, it's more of the torture.
Yeah, well, that's not the way it works. I mean, you know that. That's not the way that it works. I mean, fans want to have Jim Leland kick over a buffet table at the end of the game. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it happens. But the thing about Ivy, though, I mean, I know there was some rumors, Siddy, that, and I know you read them, that Ivy was. This is going into a dark place, and this is what happens when you're 2-13. But there were some thoughts that Ivy was, faking illness, and Monty doesn't like him, and what's going on with that? I mean, I don't understand that. I don't get it.
Well, it's part of management, Monty's management, and his job is to get top performances out of his players. So whose fault is that? We like to blame the guy who's, shirking his responsibilities, which I guess in this case, as it's being described, it would be Ivy. But come on, Jaden Ivey was excellent last year. He has nothing to prove. I wonder, just talk about Monty Williams for a moment.
Sure.
I was, I'm kind of neutral on him. I can't say I'm a big fan of his.
Right.
Signing him, it did seem like, they were kind of salvaging something they were going off the deep end, not firing, but, replacing Dwayne Casey, who I like a lot. And they found a guy, they managed, as the worst team in the league, they managed to come up with a guy, 50 years old, pretty decent pedigree. But here's the thing with Monty Williams. When you look at his coaching record, he coached in New Orleans, he coached in Phoenix. He arrived in New Orleans, first year, good record. Who was his point guard? Chris Paul.
Right.
Then at that time, the NBA, they had like an ownership deal there, and the NBA took control, and they traded Chris Paul, and then the record dropped. Mm-hmm. Then they ended up getting Anthony Davis, Eric Gordon, Drew Holiday, and slowly they started climbing the ladder a little bit. And then he was gone. Then he went to Phoenix. He arrived in Phoenix. Year one, bad record. Year two, major improvement. Mm-hmm. Who was the point guard? Take a guess. Chris Paul. Mm-hmm. So whenever Chris Paul is his point guard, his teams do great. And Chris Paul is one of the great quarterbacks in NBA history. He's like kind of like a John Stockton type, Yep. He controls tempo. He punches his opponents in the nuts when he's in a bad mood, which happened once. But he's the coach on the floor. It's a cliche, but he's the coach on the floor. He makes your life easy. Mm-hmm. And so Monty has never won without Chris Paul. I want to, and then I'm trying to understand the Killian Hayes thing. And did Monty squint his eyes a little bit and think, hey, maybe I've got that tempo guy again, the guy who can control tempo. And he had to see it. He had to throw Killian Hayes in there to see if he was that guy. And those of us that have been watching the Pistons closely, come on. We don't need to see that experiment again.
Let me ask you this question, and I'll just be very blunt with you. If Killian Hayes today was released or traded by the Pistons, would he find a home? Is there a home for? Is there a place for Killian Hayes?
He would get picked up immediately. Yes.
By I know. Okay, but by who and in what role?
He would be a backup, third or fourth guard for basically any team in the league.
Third or fourth guard, okay.
Any team in the league would like to have
30, 35 minutes a night.
Yeah, right. He's a fourth guard. He's got to get better just to be a third guard. That's the goal here. Forget starting at this point. Yeah. We're talking before the season started, I thought, okay, Killian, what's going to happen with him? Is he going to get DNPs or is he going to get 10 minutes? I'm hopeful he can be a backup. Because believe it or not, the backup point guards now are really valuable. It used to be, teams carried 5 bigs, but not anymore. It's the backup point guards are hard to find. Teams are always, basically grabbing not great players. It's like the weakest position in the NBA.
We should mention on this program that Steve or Siddy has been very, from the get-go. This is not a case, by the way, listeners or viewers, of a guy who's all of a sudden, doing a hindsight is 2020 thing.
No, Siddy can take a victory lap. Be honest.
Right. Yeah. Right. Siddy from the
very rare. Yeah.
From the get-go.
Yeah.
From the get-go. Back in 2020, when I remember this vividly, when Hayes was drafted, Siddy from the get-go was against the draft.
I hated Troy Weaver so badly.
Right.
Trading Bruce Brown for a pile of poo. Right. And tossing Kennard away and then drafting Killian Hayes. I was out of my mind. I was losing my mind. Right. I wanted Weaver fired just for all of that. Right. And it's rare that I feel that strongly about a draft pick because, it's conjecture,
True.
Like, Asar Thompson, I would not have chosen him. But
you like him, though. You like him, though.
I like him. I can understand why people like him, but I wouldn't have taken him. Yeah. But Killian Hayes, when I watched the film, I'm like, why are we even talking about this guy?
Yeah.
He looked like a backup journeyman point guard. He had no obvious skills.
Yeah.
And he wasn't fast. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't break down his defender in France. I'm like, well, why is he a lottery pick? That's not going to get any easier in the NBA. And that's what happened, and so here we are. Now everybody wants to kick him to the curb. And I'm like, well, hold on. Maybe he can be a backup. Let's just, be realistic here. Lower our expectations, 90%. And then, so, we can use them. We made this huge, and what's painful is the investment, the number 7 pick, the minutes, all these minutes, year after year, it just doesn't end. Yeah. And then we toss away Saddiq Bey. Come on, get Weaver out of here.
Yeah. We're talking with Siddy Hall, our NBA insider and our stats guru here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg, joined, of course, by Big Al Beaton and Nick Milanovich. And let's bring Big Al in. What you got for Siddy Hall?
Well, while we're talking about Pistons guards, I guess we should talk about Cade Cunningham because there's a lot of rumblings in the media right now about maybe he is not the guy you would expect out of the first overall draft pick. I mean, The Ringer had a big article the last day or so with the headline, Cade Cunningham just might not be a number 1 option. And it goes on to advanced stats. If you go into the advanced stats of Cade Cunningham, he does not come off very good. And obviously the turnovers have been a massive, massive deal with him. So Cade Cunningham, what is he at this point? Are the Pistons asking too much of this guy? Because if he is the guy, he should be able to handle the pressure and minutes he's getting. And he seems, I don't know if he's wearing down or trying to do too much, but especially at the end of games, he seems to be falling apart.
Well, he's playing hero ball. He knows what the He did it last night. It happened the opener against Miami. He had a pretty good game. He had a pretty good game last night, and then he tried to take over. I mean, that's old school basketball. He's a young guy. It's a mistake. But I hear you, Al. The rumblings are legit. I read the article that you're referring to. It's a good article. I'm an efficiency guy. The stats I play with and have played with, his numbers are, as a rookie, he was not very efficient, but that's normal for rookies. And then last year he played 12 games and then, sat out the rest. Now this year, again, those shooting efficiency numbers are just not there. And it's really frustrating. I've talked about this before. I think everyone was expecting him to come in here and be a sniper, knock down threes, and he's not. He's like he works really, really hard to get his shots, to get his 2-pointers, and that's old school. You know, he needs to find easier ways to score. Of course, you know, but look, I want to cut to the chase. Everything I'm saying, everyone's talking about this stuff. My observation about him, I don't think he's recovered. I don't think he's 100% back. You know, he's averaging, his rebounds per 36 minutes are like three and change. He has 2 dunks on the year, you know, or 2 block shots. You know, 2
he doesn't
dunks.
make.
He has like
See,
4
he doesn't
blocks,
make any.
2
He
blocks.
doesn't make any clutch shots. Zero. He doesn't make any
know?
shots in the clutch. None. Zero. No, I'm not trying to be. Really, he doesn't make any. He does. He's the antithesis of Isaiah Thomas.
Well, when I'm talking about those, I'm worried about his physicality, his athleticism. He was never like an above the rim skywalker. You know, he gets a little bit of business done there, but I don't think his legs. What was it? 1 leg, 2 legs. I don't think they're 100% back. Because when you have 1 dunk every 2 weeks, something's wrong. Right. You know, he's 6'6". He has the ball in his hands a lot. He's grabbing 3 rebounds instead of 6 or 7. Right. They're defending him. You know, they're coming at him with doubles because he has no help. Right. You know, they're not afraid of anybody, you know, around him. That's correct. But they're now learning they don't even need to do that because you can kind of guard him one-on-one. He can't blow by people. And what's left really is he still has that great vision. You know, he finds teammates. He delivers dimes. You got to hope, from in my perspective, we got to hope that his leg is not 100%. If it is, then there's a big problem.
You know, there's one thing though that I do like about him, Siddy, and that's and I know this is a hackneyed term, but and I hate to use the word leadership, but the one thing that he does do to me is he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He just said the other day that the Pistons were bad. He said, "Look, we're bad," and he doesn't try. To me, he seems he has that gene of that he will take accountability. He will be. I get the sense, and I that's my opinion. I get the sense that he's the leader of the team. I get the sense that he's the voice of the team. He's kind of like Isaiah Thomas light in that regard. But for what you're describing is absolutely spot on. We're talking with Siddy Hall, our NBA stats guru, are in our Pistons Insider. Let's bring Nick Milanovich back in. What you got for Siddy Hall?
Yeah, the one question I have for you is, like, a lot of times when teams stink like this, the focus goes from the team success to trying to find individual, what do you call it? Something good to say about individual players, like either stats or whatever it is. Is there anybody on the Pistons you think either surprised you at how good they're playing, or do you think there's anybody that you think is like doing really well and looks promising?
Well, you know, everyone's talking about Sasser, right? Marcus Sasser. He stepped in day one. Yeah. Well, you know, the guy, Nick. I mean, you got to really be watching a lot of Piston games to know this, but just in the last 2 weeks. Stanley Umuji, who has been lighting it up. Right. And it's interesting with him because if he continues to contribute, he will be, one of my problems. I'm going to talk about 2 things at once. You know, one of my problems with Troy Weaver, which he drives me crazy, and one is that when you are the worst team in the league and you're rebuilding and you have a 15-man roster plus 2-way contracts, you're supposed to be having a gong show. All these, undrafted rookies or guys that have been playing in Europe for 3 or 4 years and working on their game, you're supposed to be turning over those stones and finding these guys, bringing them in and turning it into a gong show. And finding your Jose Alvarado, finding your Lou Dort, finding these guys that are cheap. Just last year, at the end of the year, when Detroit was, mothballing everybody and not even trying, San Antonio signed Julian Champagne. The guy scored like 24 a game over the last 2 weeks. They signed him to a 4-year deal at $3 million a year. And we were playing Corey Joseph, And that's the mentality. So finally, after 4 years, for the first time, the Pistons have a guy who might help, who was not a first-round reject who flamed out somewhere else. Not a second, just a legitimate no-name guy who was brought in, developed, who could possibly contribute for a number of years on a team-friendly contract. It took 4 years for this to happen. Stanley Amuji, though, that's my answer. He's been nice.
Didn't they have they brought in a guy at the end of last season, kind of like that too, like out of nowhere. For the life of me, I can't remember his name.
Eugene Amori.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
really
that weird name. Yeah, he played pretty well. He's now with Washington, so he was with Oklahoma City, and then Detroit looked at him. He was pretty decent, and Troy decided to look elsewhere. And now he's with Washington. He's doing okay, helping out there a little bit. Deep bench guy.
Okay.
Hey, when are we going to bring back Buddy Boeheim?
They tried.
That's what got me is that they literally paid Buddy Boeheim for a year.
Yeah, they tried again. He came into the summer league and he made like 3 shots and they signed him again. And I'm like, get out of here. Yes. By the way, let me bring up a point. There's something I wanted to mention today. And that is, this is year 4 of what I call the 8-year project, the Troy Weaver 8-year plan. He didn't call it that. I call it that because, when you draft guys, you have control of their future for 8 years. So he came in year 1, with Bay and Killian and Beef Stew, and it's now year 4. Well, that's significant because year 4 is also the year when Joe Dumars, as president, GM of Detroit, won a championship. Right? There are the win totals, my friends. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see this. Everyone else, it's the win totals year by year. Joe D, Troy, over a 4-year span. Remember, in Joe Dumars' tenure, the Pistons won a title this year. And you're going to say, well, that's stupid. You're comparing apples and oranges. Joe Dumars had a lot more to work with. It's not true. If you go back and look at the Sports Illustrated NBA preview of the 2000 season, Joe Dumars' first year, the Pistons were rated 27th out of 29 teams. That's how bad they looked. That's how bleak their future looked. And in 4 years, Joe D, built a championship team. Troy Weaver, can't get it going. And I bring this up because, Dumars, you go back and look at his career, played his entire career with Detroit, part of the 2 championships. We all know that. Yep. Came back, took over a team. It was a lump of coal when Grant Hill was leaving, turned that into a championship. Then all the Eastern Conference Finals. So basically, everything that good has happened in the history of the Piston franchise basically happening, except for a year or two when Ray Scott was coaching. Yeah. Joe Dumars was the guy. Right. And then we ran him out of town. We kicked him to the curb. He hadn't done anything for a few years. And I call, we're in the desert now. This is the curse of Joe. We are living through the curse of Joe. The guy did everything in Detroit. Good guy. He was the one guy everybody liked. If you were not, if you were anti the bad boys, the one guy everybody liked was Joe Dumars. Class act, everything. We threw him away. And now we're walking through the desert. We're paying for our sins. This is the Detroit fan base just, basically shat on the guy. Never should have happened.
That's interesting you bring that up, because, but I will push back a little bit on that to say that, Joe, and we just talked to Keith Gave a little while ago, and Keith pointed out rightly that Joe Dumars was the man who drafted Darko Milicic. Okay, now I'm not saying that, I'm not suggesting that one draft pick should define your career as a GM, but he did do that. Okay, let's face it. And at the time, Siddy, when Joe was, as you say, run out of town, I can kind of see why, because the Pistons had kind of plateaued. You mentioned the one championship in 2004, almost had another one in 2005. But Joe made some curious decisions. He made a very curious decision in 2008 when he hired Michael Curry to be the head coach. He made a very curious decision to trade Chauncey for Allen Iverson. I thought that was odd. There was some. Let's not give him a free pass, and let's call it like it is. I mean, Joe made some bad decisions. He got lucky, frankly, with the whole Grant Hill / Ben Wallace / Chucky Atkins trade. Let's be honest. Nobody knew who Ben Wallace was. Took Ben Wallace 10 games to score 20 points. Let's be honest about that. Ben ended up being a Hall of Famer. Good on the NBA, by the way, for inducting a Hall of Famer who was all defense. But let's face it, Joe got lucky. He Grant Hill's ankle didn't hold out. When he went to Orlando, he was going to pair with Tracy McGrady and be a great duo over there. Didn't work out because of the injury to Grant. Joe got lucky a little bit. Let's be honest here. But on the other hand, the Troy Weaver era, though, you mentioned, you and I have talked about this offline. We both agree that Troy is probably a pretty good talent evaluator, and you put it perfectly. But he doesn't have the nuance that is needed to be an executive. And let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, well, being a GM is a relationship job. We always kind of imagine ourselves maybe having that position and sitting there and pushing buttons, but it's a relationship job. It's getting to know other GMs, the other deal makers, being on the phone with them regularly, knowing what's going on. And knowing how to jump into deals, hearing about the deals that are going around the league. Teams these days, there's a lot of 3-team, 4-team, even 5-team deals. Right. You can just jump in. That's how it is now. You're like, hey, can I help out? Is there anything I can do here to grease the wheels, make this thing work? San Antonio does it all the time. Oklahoma City does it all the time. They jump into stuff. I forget the deal. It was just a few weeks ago. San Antonio obtained the option to make a first round trade swap to just help facilitate something. 5 years from now, maybe they'll get lucky, right? And they're always doing that stuff. And Troy, I don't get the sense that he's that guy. And the other thing too, I'm just speculating. I'm trying to run things through my head. Like Siddiq Bey, we started hearing rumors that Siddiq, it was on the trade block, which really surprised me. And then teams were like saying Detroit was asking for too much. So how do you go from asking for too much to James Wiseman? Right. Like he doesn't know how to pivot. He doesn't know how to persuade. That's my guess. And if that's the case, you're in the wrong job, besides even, and then finally, his evaluations, it seems like when he loses interest in his own guys, he doesn't have the patience or the ability to kind of take a third person's perspective, and correctly evaluate the market value of his guys and have the patience to get full value. He just throws guys away for 20 cents on the dollar. And then when he wants somebody, he lunges.
Yeah, right.
Here come the sweeteners. Everyone knows it. I mean, the other GMs know it. They see it. It's been going on for 3.5 years. They all know. Sasser threw in 2 second-rounders. A lot of people, a lot of the speculation was he was going to be there for Detroit in the second round. But Troy just, he can't take any chances if he likes somebody. Well, if you do that every time, you look now, Detroit's -1 in first-round draft picks. They're even in second-round draft picks. They have none of their own. Mm-hmm. So, like, if they have the 31st pick next year, it's not theirs. Yeah. They're going to have 45 or something, whatever. He's ain't got it. He's competing with 29 other guys. It ain't going to happen with him. They got to move on.
We're talking with City Hall here, our NBA stats guru and Pistons insider. Let's bring in Big Al. What you got for City?
Well, why don't we talk about something at least a little more positive? And that would be, there's been a couple of, I think, bright spots. Jalen Duren, before he injured his ankle, he looked like the guy. The way he was playing that first week or two of the season, when he was a dominant big man. Unfortunately, him getting hurt, I think, is a huge reason why this team hasn't been winning any games. And then you have Oscar Thompson, who has come out. He's not a great shooter, and we all knew that, but the kid plays a great defense and is a hell of a rebounder. So there are some bright spots here, but once again, there's these caveats: either injuries or they're very one-dimensional, and that's part of the issue here.
You're exactly right about Duren being out. I mean, they would not be 2-13 if Duren had stayed healthy. Mm-hmm. So, he's the guy they can bank on. He's definitely. Now, I think people are overrating him a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's shown he has expanded his game a little bit. He's got time to expand it more. But if he's going to be the stud that people think he might be, he's got to really add some wrinkles that are not easy to do.
Yeah, well,
putting the ball on the floor. Exactly. Chet Holmgren, going 4 for 4 on threes and dribbling the basketball. I mean, it's a totally different level, Duren falls into a category really kind of similar to Andre Drummond. Mm-hmm. A guy who grabs a lot of rebounds. He's big, occupies a lot of space, grabs the traffic rebounds and dunks, So it's kind of like Drummond before he got polluted by Stan Van Gundy trying to turn him into Dwight Howard, So, but Duren's important. Oscar Thompson, he's an unusual player. Yeah, he's in a honeymoon period right now. Mm-hmm. I watched his tape, before he was drafted, him and his brother, and when you first looked at them in those tapes, it was really easy to see why teams like those guys. They're just smooth athletes. Clyde Drexler, Scottie Pippen, but. Those guys played in the 80s and 90s when the three-pointer didn't dominate. Yeah. So I thought Oscar was a risk at 5 for that reason. Like, how is he going to fit in without the three ball? And, there's a weird stat about him. His three-point shooting right now, when he shoots, he's more likely to shoot an air ball than to score. It's true. He's like 4 for 28 or something. He has more than 4 air balls from there. That's, it's hard to imagine him getting that three ball to the level that needs to at least be, Drexler was like 3.25, I think. Him and Pippen, nobody was afraid of those guys out there, but they could make enough to keep you a little bit honest, Now in today's NBA though, it's so critical. So if you have a wing that's normally a three ball, supplier, not providing it, and then you got Beef Stew, you got Bagley, all 3 bigs. Where's it going to come from? They seem so far away in terms of just team construction. And then Thompson, again. He has a real high basketball IQ. He's really smart, but the Lord forgot about the hands.
Yeah. The guy would be an all-pro, but he can't shoot essentially.
Yeah.
In today's league, you got to shoot. Yeah.
Many years ago, you could get away with that. He just go along the baseline. He grabs rebounds. He dunks. He's really smart. He finds guys. He has a super advanced understanding of what's going on out there, but he is not scaring people with the ball. So we'll see how people feel in 2 years.
This autopsy of the Red Wings, of the Pistons, is brought to you by City Hall, or resident NBA stats guru. Let's bring Nick Milanovich back into this discussion. What you got for City Hall?
I think we're gonna have to identify a basketball team by the dental records at this point. Like,
yeah, well, Yeah, right. I mean, who we banking on here? You know, well, Duran, Ivy, Cade. You know, we just don't know where he's coming in at. Thompson, we don't know where he's coming in at. But again, it just seems like, you know, year 4, we still have a long way to go.
So I got a question for you. Like, out of all the Detroit sports, for some reason, I'm most drawn to watching basketball. Unfortunately, and at least for the last few years, it's been brutal. What I've kind of noticed, and let me know what you think is, honestly, the Pistons look like they're a pickup team against an NBA team. Is the way I describe it.
Well,
because
you must have watched the Toronto game 2 days ago, right?
Oh,
That was brutal. That was a new low. But hey, look, it's going to change. It's going to change soon. You know, you're going to get Duran back, just like those first 3 games. They were 2-1. They lost by 1 point. Then their 1 loss. I mean, it's going to change, and they're going to get exciting again. And Cade suddenly is going to, you know, we saw it last night. Cade and Ivy finally playing together. We're playing off each other. And there were some moments there you could see a glimpse of the future that looked bright. You know, it's like, hallelujah. You know, game 13. I mean, I thought we were going to see this from the beginning. Cade and Ivy, you know, and we got Cade and Killian. So it's gonna come. The risk here, though, my fear is that the Pistons are gonna have to go through like a second rebuild. That happens sometimes. That's a worst case scenario. You know, Orlando went through it. You know, they tossed away Aaron Gordon, they tossed away Vucevic, and, you know, got some picks back, and then they started making good picks. And suddenly Orlando's good now and fun to watch. But they actually went through a second rebuild. That happens sometimes, you know, and that Detroit looks like, you know, 3 years from now, 4 years, they're going to be discarding these guys, just like Saddiq Bey already. I don't know. It's too far away in the future to predict, but, you know, and then you're going to have more assets, more picks, you know, and you get into an easier rebuild or less difficult rebuild.
I don't know. I think like when anytime you're trading for draft picks, you're always taking steps back. You know, when you're trading assets for picks, because picks are a roll of the dice. Like you know, there's very few sure players when you're drafting, and
well, the thing about today's NBA, you can draft guys anywhere in the first round and find guys, so you don't have to be in the top 3 or 4. You know,
right?
But you know, you look at Utah. You know, Utah had assets. They had Donovan Mitchell and Gobert, and they made that shocking pivot. And just in that pivot, you know, they got back from, besides future picks, they got back Lauri Markkanen, who everybody was undervaluing, and he's a stud. They got him from Cleveland for Donovan Mitchell. He's great. And then from Minnesota, the 22nd pick, they got Walker Kessler, who almost won Rookie of the Year last year. So all of a sudden, they've got these 2 guys and tons of picks. They were supposed to be bad last year. They almost made the playoffs. So why, you know, and then you look at Detroit, you know, still down here. Oklahoma City, they had Holmgren at number 2, and he missed his first year. They had Giddey at 6, and, you know, why are they successful? And why are we still in the bottom? You know, we're doing something wrong.
Let's talk about the Troy Weaver question. I mean, you know, I know it's easy to say fire Weaver, blah blah blah. Okay, fine, that's fine. But if you do that, what do you do? Who do you bring in here? I mean, you know, is this a situation where the Pistons can bring in a guy who's, you know, look at the Lions. I mean, you know, as much as I hate to admit it, Brad Holmes has been wonderful with the Lions. Let's face it. I mean, I'd be derelict if I didn't say otherwise. If the Pistons were to fire Weaver, what would they do?
Oh, there are so many people out there that are potential GMs. I mean, it's hard for us on the sidelines to recognize who they are, but if you're in the business and you're, in the day-to-day business and the talks and knowing who people are, there are 50 guys out there that could try. Troy Weaver's no sacred cow.
Right.
You got to move on. In my mind, you
Yeah.
got to move on for him because Bruce Brown and
Yeah.
Siddy, you cannot
Yeah.
give away those are very easy trades to
Mhm.
analyze. You cannot give guys away, and he's going to do it again. You can't trust him. He's not an executive. Move him into the scouting. That's whatever. It took him a long time to get this opportunity, and I think we're kind of understanding why. We're seeing both things. We're seeing a guy who seems to have some recognition for spotting talent,
Right.
which is what he did, I presumably in OKC. But he didn't get the chance to sit in the GM chair because something was missing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's a personality thing. It's just, it's not about just evaluating talent.
Sure. Siddy Hall, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. It's fun to talk to you. Unfortunately, I wish it was under better circumstances.
Hey, this was a victory lap in a lot of ways for Siddy anyway. So,
well,
Siddy,
I'm
cold-blooded, you guys.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. So,
no, well, that's
and when things
true.
get good
That's
and you hear it out of my mouth, you'll know it's true.
That's
right.
Absolutely true, and we appreciate that. And one of these days, Siddy, Al and I, and now Mick, Mick or whatever his name is, have done this. Have done this show. Have done this show for some 14 years, and never have we talked. This is true. Never have we talked about a Red Wings, a Pistons playoff victory, not just a series victory, but a playoff win in 14, 15 years now. And so, what can we say?
These things can change quicker than you think. A good move here, a good draft pick there, all of a sudden you're in business. I mean, they got some support pieces. Cade gets a little help, remove the pressure, his leg heals a little better. Ivy's nice. They got some pieces, but it's hard to foresee right now. What is it going to be? I don't have that answer. But,
okay, real quick, before I let you go, this is plus or minus wins. They had 17 last year. Do they attain that this year?
Yes, they will surpass that.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they don't.
We'll bring it back in a few months and we'll see.
Yeah, I think they're going to start winning. And they got to when they get Jaden back, and you saw it the first 3 games. I mean,
Well,
that was not a mirage.
I told Nick and Al, I said, Nick said, Siddy's going to be, beside himself. I said, well, I said, Siddy's actually kind of taking a chill attitude toward this, and you are, but you're also, as usual, very honest, and we appreciate that. So, thanks for being here. We'll see you soon, my friend. Okay.
I can honestly say I enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye. Oh, boy.
All right. Well, we're already pushing 8:45, Greg. So you just want to do a quick intro and outro so we can get you out of here?
Well, did you want to talk about no Lions then? You want?
Well, it's up to you because I know you had a hard out.
Yeah, I know. Can we do the Lions in like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes?
Sure. We got about 15 minutes.
Okay, let's do the Lions real quick.
All right. So let's just go right into the Lions. All right.
Okay.
We'll just do that right now. So let me still recording.
No, we can even skip the whose birthday is it game.
Yeah, well, we can skip all that. No worries.
Okay.
All right. So
we've had, by the way, guys, we've had 2 really good interviews so far. Really
Those
good.
are great. Those are great.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, Nick, since we last spoke, obviously the Lions have, well, I guess when we last spoke, I think the Lions were 1-2. Like I said, first off to the listeners, I do have to apologize. Us not being on for 2 months is my fault, basically because I've been either traveling or I've been up at the cabin. There's been a couple unexpected trips, and that's why we weren't able to talk to Keith for 2 months like we were originally supposed to. So that's why it's been so long. And all of a sudden, they're 8-2 guys. We're headed into the Turkey Day game in a couple days against the 4-6 Packers. The Lions are 8-2. This is the best record at this point of season since 1962. And of course, that was back in the day where only one team from each conference essentially made the championship game. And I think the Lions went 11-3 that year and still finished the second behind the Packers. Regardless of that, right now, Greg, Nick, they have the second best record in the NFL, behind the 9-1 Eagles, thanks to their win over Kansas City last night. But regardless, the Lions are in great shape to host a playoff game. They have a very good shot to earn a bye. They're competing right now with the Eagles for that. And they're lead the North over by 2.5 games over the 6-5 Vikings, who are playing who lost Kirk Cousins for the season to a torn Achilles. And they were playing, God, who the hell, they're playing a former Lion at quarterback. God, I forgot his name already. Just like the Jets are going to be playing a former Lion at quarterback this coming week in Tim Boyle, but that's another discussion.
Oh, God.
But it's been a wild roller coaster ride. There's been a one really bad loss. That was the 38-6 blowout to the Ravens, but they have won 3 straight since. They dominated the Raiders. They had a wild shootout that they went on the road against the Chargers, and then a game where they got totally outplayed for 56 minutes against the Bears, and then in the final 4 minutes scored 16 points to beat the Bears 31-26. So here we are, 8-2, guys. Where are we going here, Greg?
Well, the Lions, to me, and Nick knows this. I and you do too. I'm not a Lions slappy by any stretch, but it would be derelict of me to say that the Lions have not. Let's face it, they're a good team. Let's be honest about that. They're a good team, but
yes,
I will say this: they are a team that you look at the. Here's the thing: you look at the Bears game, and guys, if you look at the last series of that, and when I say the last series before the fumble at the end of the game,
right?
The Bears played to not lose. Now, Matt Eberflus, who's the Bears coach, is being absolutely filleted.
It was like watching Jim Caldwell all over again, really.
Right. Yeah. Matt Eberflus on Bears Twitter and Bears Reddit, Alan, you're on Reddit, has been absolutely filleted by the fan base there for his and so has Getsy, their offensive coordinator, for their playing not to lose philosophy against the Lions. 2 ridiculous runs into the line when the Lions brought the game into 26-21, and then the prayer long pass to a rookie on 3rd and 10. Okay, they're doing things that the Lions used to do when before Campbell. Okay, let's be honest about that. The thing about the Lions right now, Al and Nick, is that I feel like they are they're learning how to win. They're learning how to close out games. They're learning how to they've got an aura about them that tells them they're going to win the game no matter what. And I've been dogging this franchise for a number of years, as you both know, but I would be derelict to say anything other than this team is learning how to put their foot on the neck of a team that is down. And the Bears, and I've been looking at Reddit a lot about the Bears, and the team, the fan base there is absolutely beside themselves.
Oh yeah,
with how they lost that game against the Lions on Sunday, mainly because of their very conservative play calling toward the end of the game. Number one, and how they play prevent defense against a very potent offense toward the end, and it's interesting to see how the other half lives, essentially.
Yeah, and you talk about putting the throat in the neck. I think the Chargers game was what really drove that home. When I think Dan Campbell realized we cannot let the Chargers have the ball back, and he played that final drive to perfection, to where you knew they were setting up for going forward on 4th down. because I'm years ago, the second to last play of that drive before they converted on the fourth down, is years ago I would have been apoplectic if they had thrown short of the sticks on 3rd and 14, and they threw a 12-yard pass to Amon-Ra. But knowing Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, you knew that was just to set up that 4th and 2 play, which because they knew they could not give the ball back. So they threw short of the sticks with a purpose to give them a manageable 4th down, which they converted. Then they took the knees and kicked the game-winning field goal. The Chargers never got the ball back. And the Chargers fan base is about ready to hang Brandon Staley in effigy at this point. They hate that man.
Right.
So,
well, but don't you think? But don't you think though that we've in 2021 when the Lions were still obviously finding their way under Dan Campbell, you and I, Al, were both very critical. Of how Dan Campbell would handle the clock. What clock management was to us, you and me. And not just you and me, an issue. And I feel like he's grown exponentially in that.
Oh, he's been great at clock management this year. He really has been.
Al, let's bring Nick in.
You can learn, as a coach, you can learn that clock management. If you're a terrible strategist in general, you may or may not be able to figure that out.
Right.
And but one of the things I was thinking is, like, I was looking at that Bears team playing the Lions, and I looked at them, and all I could say is the Bears are classic same old Lions.
I agree. I
saw everything. It's like that the Lions used to do. They could dominate in time of possession. They could outplay the other team and still just do enough stupid things to lose.
Right.
And that's exactly what the Bears did. They botched it at the worst possible time. And they had the Lions on the ropes. You don't pick off the opposing quarterback 3 times in a game and normally expect to lose. And but unless you're a bad team, of course. And the Bears are a 3-win team, let's face it. So we did see, I just call it the same old Lions because we've been seeing this for decades with Detroit. Even when the Detroit has lost, it's not been same old Lions losses. They just got beat that day.
Right.
So it's a really different Lions teams.
Well, you know what it is, Nick. It's not just you're right about they're not the same old Lions thing, but it's how they've responded to those losses. They got completely shelled. In Baltimore, we all know that. It was complete undressing in Baltimore. But they responded, and they've won 3 straight since then. It's the response. And Al knows this. Al's been covering. Al's been with the team since forever. And the thing is that in the past, that was a game like Baltimore would have been the greasing of the skids.
The snowball.
Right, but they responded to that. And to me, Al, I don't know about what you think. To me, that's the most impressive thing.
Oh, definitely, it really is. This is that was literally the game that you throw away the film, just move on from it. And at the same time, at that point of the season, Baltimore was probably playing the best football in the league. They were playing at that point, they could have beat any, and they've kind of come back to earth and since then.
They beat Seattle and Detroit combined 75-9.
Exactly. Yeah, it's crazy how well they were playing there for a few weeks. But there are some. I don't know if I say cracks in the foundation, but there are some concerns. They've been a little loose with the football lines. They turned the ball over 3 times against the Raiders, which is amazing.
Four, 3. You talk the Raiders.
The Raiders game 3 times, and then 4 times against the Bears.
You're right.
Yeah. So and then in the Chargers game, the defense could not get off the field. The last 5 possessions, the Chargers scored 5 touchdowns. That's what Dan Campbell said. We are not giving them the ball back and play the clock beautifully.
Right.
But but it says the volumes that the Lions have won, but it also is a little concerning about how those games have gone, especially the time of possession in the Bears game was crazy. The Bears had 40 minutes to the Lions, 40 minutes and change to the Lions, 19 minutes and change.
Right.
And what's even crazier, though, the Lions ultimately outgained the Bears, thanks to that crazy end of the fourth quarter. So,
Yeah.
Is this probably? I still think this is a team that probably is not going to make the Super Bowl, but this is a team that's going to get a home playoff game, should win a home playoff game.
Right.
But I just don't think they're quite at the level of the Eagles and the 49ers right now. Maybe even the Cowboys as well. I mean, this is a very good team. I think they're still lacking in a couple spots. Specifically, they need more help on the pass rush. It can't just be all Hutchinson at this point.
Right.
And the linebacking has played well, but they've kind of come back to earth, and they need cornerbacks. They still need cornerbacks because they all got hurt, the guys they signed this past offseason. So I think this team is like one or two defensive players away from being a Super Bowl team, but that's not going to be this year.
Let's bring Nick in. What do you say, Nick?
Well, I do agree. The defense actually has been either gets carved up or or like hits a home run, basically. I mean, they're tough. Like at the very end of the Bears game, they were tough as hell on that last the Bears' last possession.
Right.
That concerns me even more. I saw this in the Chargers game. There was one point where they weren't advancing the ball, and if they had a good kicker, they could have gone for 3 points.
Right.
But they opted to punt instead. Right?
Yeah.
And they have a terrible kicker. The guy can't hit over 50 yards. Good luck with that. And, the championship teams need some guy that has range, somewhere in the mid 50s or more. And this guy can hit on the 40s, but, so, you want to be able to get your points any way you can.
Yeah.
So they have to gamble and actually go down the field and try and score a touchdown because their kicking is meh.
You know what? I talked about this. I can't remember which show it was. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it was the last one, the one before that. But I said that sooner or later there was going to be a situation where the Lions were going to be in a situation where a kick was going to determine a game, whether it was going to be. And by the way, these kicks that determine games don't have to happen at the end of the game. They can happen midway through the third quarter. They can happen in the first half. And Nick's right. I said, look, there's going to be a scenario where the Lions are going to rely on a kick, and it's not going to happen. And I think a lot of this fourth down stuff is, and you'll never get Dan Campbell to admit it, of course, is his lack of confidence in Riley Patterson. Now Patterson, to his credit, made a big kick in the playoffs when he played for Jacksonville last year. Let's be honest, he did. He made a big kick, but he's not a strong leg. He's not a Matt Prater. He's not a strong leg guy. Okay, so when the Lions get in the mid 30s, 35-yard line, 35, 36, 37, they're going to err on the side of going for it on fourth down because, to Nick's point, they don't have the confidence in their kicker to kick, a game. It doesn't have to be a game-winning field goal, period. And so they go for it on 4th and 5, 4th and 6, whatever, because they don't have the confidence in their kicker. And that's something that's, I think they've kind of Lions have been able to kind of overcome so far. But I think sooner or later that's going to, it's going to rear its head.
Yeah. It's going to catch up with them. It will at some point.
All right, guys, we are getting low on time. We really need to wrap this show up because I know Greg's got a heart out. So, Greg? What's your jerk of the week?
Well, that's a good point. My jerk of the week is, I'm going to have to go with the Detroit Free Press. And the reason I say that is because Willie Hernandez unfortunately passed away today. He was, a big cog in the 1984 World Championship team. And the Detroit News, as usual, was behind the times, did not report or did not feature the story. And I'm not trying to, say that you've got to be right on top of a guy dying, but the Free Press did not run the Willie Hernandez story until well after multiple media outlets had reported on it.
Right.
And it bothers me because, Hernandez is such an integral part of the 1984 championship that for the Free Press, and the News, by the way, did the same thing. They were a little bit faster on it than the Free Press was, but both of them were way behind in reporting. We talked with Keith Gate when we talked about how, things are reported, blah, blah, blah. I was really disappointed, frankly, to see how the Free Press was behind the times on the Willie Hernandez story. This is a guy who was, incredibly integral to the Tigers' 1984 championship, and for them to just completely, they were way behind Al and Nick. I'm reporting this, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but that's almost unconscionable.
Yeah, without a doubt. Nick, who's your jerk?
Well, I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna touch on the U of M, quote unquote cheating scandal videotape thing. And my jerk of the week is actually Paul Feinbaum, which that might be too easy, but
Paul, yes,
and whatever the hell his name is, and people can be critical of Michigan and what they've done, and like Harbaugh not having control, but this guy's had an axe to grind with Michigan no matter what, and he's going to the extreme. In this case, what they did is probably what Michigan did is probably what a lot of other schools do in some form or not. It's kind of minor in the world of cheating or any kind of like sports atrocities, to be honest. And he's talking about the integrity of the game and it'll be forever, just that kind of bullshit. And it's just dumb. And so that's going overboard, and it's just part of his whole axe to grind with Harbaugh the whole time.
I am completely with you there. I think there's been a lot of hysterical pearl clutching from certain people in the media about talking college football and integrity. That's like, military intelligence or jumbo shrimp. That ship sailed a long time ago. So, all right. My jerk of the week, I'm going to go with Clarissa Thompson. She is a host for Fox Sports and for also does the Amazon Prime Football. And she is best known as a sideline reporter. So she was on a podcast, one of the Barstool Sports podcasts. And she admitted during this podcast that she couldn't talk to a coach, or the coach didn't give enough information. She just made it up and reported it as fact, going into a half or whatever. And she said it like the matter of fact, like this is something she's done for years. And just said it half jokingly. And then when she started getting called out by the Pam Olivers and the like of the world, who have been doing that same job for years and have never, and as far as we know, have never lied to anybody about what they'd gotten from coaches, she tried to walk it back, saying she was joking. That is as they say, the last refuge of a scoundrel. I said, I was just kidding. No bullshit. So my jerk of the week is Clarissa Thompson for essentially giving the media another black eye and another reason why people can start screaming fake news when they hear something they don't want to hear, because shit, they're not lying. That's ridiculous.
Right. That's a great one. But the thing I don't get about that is why she did it. Why she went almost out of her way to admit that. I don't know what the bang for the buck was there.
Right. That's weird. It really is. That's a good point. Other than, she was on a Barstool Sports podcast. Who the hell knows why? So, Nick, you're going to say something?
I was thinking she just was in the moment and wanted to talk about an entertaining story. But you know what? Maybe we could give her the Brian Williams Award. Remember the NBC? Head who used to just make shit up?
There you go. All right, we have our Brian Williams Award to Clarissa Thompson.
No, seriously though, what's troublesome about that Thompson story, Al, isn't just that it happened. There's two things that are troublesome about that. Number one, that she admitted it. And B, I feel like we're in a time now where that's not as. That should be a bigger deal than it is.
You're right. That should be a fireable offense.
Right. And I feel like we're in a time now where that is, I don't maybe not accept, but not as big of a deal as it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that'd be great to talk to Keith Gave about, for example. But, I mean, next time we have him on, we'll bring that up. All right, we need to get out of here. And I know Greg's got a heart out. So, Greg, why don't you get out the thank yous and everything else that's you'd like to add before we head out of here?
Absolutely. Please, subscribe to my Substack, gregino.substack.com. I come at you every Monday for the most part in your inbox. My latest piece was about Alex Karras and the Lions. 1962 Thanksgiving Day game, and the Lions played the Packers again on Thanksgiving Day this week, and there's some parallels there. Please subscribe to me there. I come into your inbox every Monday afternoon. And Big Al, I want to also thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this baloney for every other Tuesday, and thank Nick Milanovich, of course, for his time.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Nick?
No, it was great to finally be back with you guys, and the fact that we had Keith and Siddy both on was fantastic. And
And what's your Twitter, Nick?
My Twitter is just my name, Nick Milanovich. And
there you go.
Yeah, jump in and let's talk Detroit sports and rant and cheer and all that good stuff.
Exactly. All right, and always to give a thank you. Actually, firstly, thanks to the patience of you guys, because my life was kind of crazy for a couple months here, being out of town constantly. Hopefully, things will have simmered down for the next 6-8 weeks at least. So we should be back on a regular podcast schedule. So no worries there. Listen to the show. As always, you can find us on all the usual podcast aggregators: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. TheKneeJerks.net is our homepage. You can find all the show notes there. You can find the links to Greg's Substack, to Nick's Twitter. I'll put links to Keith Gave's books, and and I'll also mention Siddy. Had to get him in there. But yeah, any information that we talk about on the show, you can be found on TheKneeJerks.net. All right, we got to get the hell out of here. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Who knows what we'll have to talk about at that point. If we'll have any guests, just look for all that on social media. So until that time, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Ciao, guys.
And Greg Eno.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see you in 2 weeks.